You're listening to the Valley Current.
You.
Grace.
My daughter Grace is with me.
Oh, hi, Grace. You look great. So we've got the whole Stafford family. I think we're waiting on Paige. I got my mask here to protect everyone. We gotta remember this moment. It's such an interesting moment in time and space, isn't it? You could take off your mask, Audrey. You're in your own room. Just close your door.
Close the door.
Close your door.
Habit.
Hey, Paige, she looks just like you. Paige, she looks just like you.
Good. I'm glad you recognize me.
So I wanted to do this for obvious reasons, that this is a very unique moment in time and space in Silicon Valley and the United States and the world, in that we have this Zoom technology, which has really become vastly improved. I remember seeing the business plan for these guys, and I thought for sure they would fail because they give away so much stuff for free. And they were raising like $10 million at the time. If I had put a few bucks in it, I'd be a billionaire now. That's a long story of the fish that you don't catch. But we have essentially 1, 2, 3 generations of Staffords on the line. And the moment in time is we have a situation where Blake, who was the first person that I interviewed with at Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick, that was the name of the firm when I interviewed them in the 1970s, from UCLA Law School. And Blake was the reason I joined the firm. It wasn't really Bill Fenwick or Gordy Davidson. They were important, and Joel Kelman. They were all important and interesting people. Bill Wilka, no longer there. Valerie McElroy, no longer there. Bob Acker, no longer there, still a friend, now Professor Bob Acker. I could list all these people I met. But Blake was there, sitting in his dark office with the lights out, with the desk that you're sitting in, Audrey. Audrey is now sitting in your law firm desk that we've moved to an office at the building we have at our building we own at 401 Florence Street, where Paige worked at least one summer. But I want to think you worked like a year, Paige, right? Didn't you? How long did you work?
Just one summer.
One summer, okay, because then you went to Madrid after that?
No, then I went to San Francisco. I was 16 when I worked for you, Jack.
Right, you were just a teenager, and I remember.
Was between my junior and senior years in high school.
Right, you had taken you had taken some time, and we said, why don't you come and you can be the receptionist, but we were trying to train you to do more, and you were doing a bit more. I remember it was kind of an interesting time. And I think you started talking about you wanted to go to school maybe in Europe, but you fill in the blanks on that. And then we should let everyone know that this is so unique to do, because part of the reason we do this is to let people know internally at the firm that there's an extensive amount of goodwill that happens just from being around. And I've been around now in the legal profession for more than 40 years. And Blake, I think you're going on 50 soon, right? Or have you hit 50 already?
50.
50, right? So these are quite big milestones in many ways. And you know, we're at a special time when we all can't meet, so we can't celebrate with a glass of red wine or, you know, champagne. I hope we get to do that at some point. So why don't we start with you, Blake? You graduated from Stanford Law and went to work in New York, just to give a little bit of the history. Did you go to work in New York, or did you go to work in Chile first? Because you also did a stint in Chile, right?
I went to Chile first.
You went to Chile first and wrote some of their laws, right?
Yeah, I was part of the Harvard Law School International Tax Program.
Right, which is a big deal. I mean, it's a really big deal. Because Chile has actually excelled compared to other South American countries. It's done quite well, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
I mean, there's a whole story within a story there, because you built into your own practice a big international aspect to what you do. Because I remember that even when I first interviewed with you in the 1970s.
Yes,
right?
I worked in the Ministry of Finance of Chile, in Santiago de Chile. And our group, the Harvard Law School, International Tax Group, we prepared Chile's value-added tax, which they had wanted to do for a long time, in the Grupo Harvard, which was a group of a couple of Americans and a number of Chilean employees from the Ministry of Finance, most of which were communists, actually. And it was a lot of fun. We had a really great camaraderie, and we created the Chilean value-added tax, which subsequently was enacted by Salvador Allende, who succeeded Eduardo Frei as the president of Chile.
Right, and there's a lot of story behind that. But then you returned to New York and worked at a big firm for a while, right?
Yeah, I returned to New York because one of the members of the Harvard Law School International Tax Group was Roger Thomas, who was on leave of absence to the Harvard Law School International Tax Group from Cleary Gottlieb.
Right.
That also comes back to the one lawsuit that spawned what is today's Fenwick and West.
Right.
Was the Oil Shale Corporation lawsuit against the Secretary of the Interior, which was Walter Hickel.
Right.
And it involved whether or not the Department of the Interior could use the Mining Act of 1872 to invalidate claims that were staked under that law. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court a couple of times.
Right.
And it was basically ruling against the Oil Shale Corporation. But if you got on that case, the only way you could get off that case at Cleary Gottlieb, because Cleary Gottlieb would send you immediately to Denver, because that's where the whole case was being. The facts all were in the Green River Valley of Colorado. And the person who was there was Roger Thomas.
Right.
And the only way he could get off that case was go on leave of absence. And he went on leave of absence to the Harvard Law School International Tax Program.
Right. Right.
And that's where I met Roger.
Right.
But the part that is funny about that is the person who...
The birds are chirping louder and louder because they're getting excited about the story, Blake.
But the person who succeeded Roger Thomas in that position, you know who it was? Ed Lowe.
Ah, okay. Ed's a great lawyer. Or
Ed
I
Lowe
guess he's retired now.
Moved to Denver, and then Ed Lowe quit Cleary Gottlieb and went to McCutcheon in San Francisco.
Right. And then he came to you guys.
That's right.
Then he came to you guys because I remember he was there when I interviewed in the 70s, and he was a great sort of indication that the firm was really building a great team, which it did. And it was an interesting sort of evolution over time because I was a New Yorker. I grew up in Queens and then Brooklyn and went to school in Manhattan. So basically I knew everything about New York City and Cleary Gottlieb and about sort of this idea of, hey, go west, young man, go west. And all these New Yorkers basically had gone west. You were actually from New Jersey, Blake, I think, originally, right? Or Pennsylvania, New Jersey, right?
Right.
Right. And you went to Princeton as undergrad, which was a real positive aspect. And I remember in one of the very first cases I did with Bill Fenwick, which I got to argue the very first appeal in the Seventh Circuit as like a first-year attorney, was the case for Sean McLaren. I remember saying to Sean, so why did you decide to choose what was then David Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick? He said, because I saw Blake Stafford went to Princeton and I thought he must be a smart guy. And I thought that makes sense. Even though Blake was not on the litigation team, he basically had brought in this big client that we were doing ginormous litigation work in the federal court. So it was great. It was a great story, but let's now go to Paige, because Paige comes to work for us in the 1990s, like 20 something years ago, Paige?
It was 85.
Oh,
The summer of
85.
85.
Okay. 85.
Summer of
Wow.
85. And
Summer
I'd
of
just
85.
I'd just come back from a semester abroad in Ireland, in Bray,
Okay.
living with a family there in Ireland and getting to know part of our roots.
Interesting. Okay. So, see, I thought it was later than that. I have to tell you, I really thought it was later than that. I thought it was when we were in the new building. Were we in the old building?
In the old building, the Victorian at the top.
Okay, so we were at 706 Cowper, which I'll take
That's
Audrey to. It's a famous old Victorian. In fact, I've like crossed my fingers for the longest time, and I'm going to maybe now instigate a call to the people that are in that building. It's the Downing House, that at some point I'm going to get a chance to buy or co-own or do something with that building, because it's the original Downing House residence now turned into a law office suite from like the 1800s. So we have a building that we own at 401 Florence, which is barely 1900s. Like, I think it started getting built on 1893, brick by brick, and then made it to like the beginning of 1903. But Downing was there, Downing was an industrialist in Palo Alto, I want to say in like the 1880s. So he has the Downing building, which is on Hamilton, a big building that is actually a big retail complex. And he had this house about a few blocks away, and there's some great old pictures of it. So you were actually upstairs with us with Daryl Nelson then? Was Daryl
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Okay, so
it was
Daryl
the three of us.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it was the three of us. Okay, so I don't even think Tim Hale was there yet. I don't think Tim Hale had arrived.
It was the three of us.
So Daryl, of course, was a very famous barrister who worked with me at Davis, Stafford, then Fenwick and West. She had tried like 650 cases by the time she arrived in the U.S. We used to say she tried more cases than the entire state bar of California. She had an immense instinct for what would work and what would not work at trial and with judges, but really had the British tradition. So she had to learn the American tradition, which she did very quickly, very aggressively, and very competently. And I have to say, she disliked some of the ethics of opposing lawyers. I could tell you stories about that. So then you worked for us that summer, and then you decided then to finish high school, I guess, is what
Then
happened.
I finished, then I went up to San Francisco and finished high school at the Urban School. And from there, I went to Salamanca.
Okay, so then you eventually marry, and the result of the marriage is Audrey, who's here. And Audrey was finishing college and had some time off this summer. So we said, well, why don't you come and get a bit of training for what it's like to be a lawyer and a law student, and also a eventual paralegal if you decide you want to do something. Because we recommend between college and law school, people take a couple of years off, because they can really do a lot better in law school by really picking up all of the competencies of law and the vocabulary. And once you have that, law school is kind of a breeze, and you don't kill yourself. In fact, you might get bored by the second year, which some people do, and then they kind of work part-time for us to relieve the boredom. So Audrey, what's your experience been like so far? I guess you're in week 4 or 5 at this point.
Yeah, I think it actually might be like 6 or 7. Time is flying. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm learning a lot, and I don't know, I just really love like everyone that I work under, and it's been really revarding.
And you're at your
other interns, I don't know, there's just a great atmosphere here at the office.
Right. You're at your grandfather's desk. I wish there was a way to move the camera, because it's a really beautiful desk. You should do that. You should move the camera, because it's a beautiful desk. And I actually remember you being at that desk, Blake, and I remember you had like stacks and stacks of papers. Like, I remember it was like international mineral rights and maps, and you were doing like this mineral geological thing. Yeah, it's a beautiful desk. And I know Audrey, if she becomes a lawyer, is going to claim it, but I think you have another grandson who might be vying for it. and might be ahead of Audrey. So maybe we should break the bad news to Audrey, although maybe it'll generate a little competition. Isn't Dylan going to law school soon?
Yes.
Where's he going?
He's not sure yet.
Okay, because I've been saying Dylan should take a couple of years off. Maybe we send them a copy of this tape and we say, take a couple of years off and land here. I know he's into politics and the Democratic Party. I mean, I just crack up. I don't think any of these guys are really qualified to be president, but that's a separate podcast for a separate time. You guys must laugh in Spain because you're in Madrid, right, Paige?
Yeah, but you see, it's all dubbed. You know, I mean, most people in Spain, they don't hear, you know, the voice, the real voice of any of these people. It's
right.
just, you know, dubbed or voiced over a little snippet. And
right.
So they, you know, in the translation, they all seem a lot more intelligent.
Oh, really? Okay. Because to me, I call Trump, you know, Donnie. I sometimes call him Fat Donnie. I think he should go on a diet and lose weight and probably would get reelected. I call him Tin Man because he really doesn't have any heart. And I call Joe Biden Scarecrow Joe because I don't think he has a brain. I hate to say that, Joe, but you don't come across as really being able to put a sentence together. I know you used to stutter and, you know, you have all sorts of ADA rights, and I hope I'm not disparaging you, but you really need to kind of get with it. And then I think their VP candidates, whoever there are not much more qualified either. And I don't know if either of these guys are going to survive for another 4 years because I don't think their health is all that great, particularly in the middle of a pandemic. You know, that said, we have to have a lot of gratitude that we're all not sick because we're all still healthy. And I think so far we've been taking the temperature of people. You've got the little temperature controller there. And so far, everyone, your daughter is safe, Paige. She's like the person that's in charge of taking the temperature, and we got all these ginormous posters about 6 feet away, and be really careful and wash your hands. And you know, it's just an unbelievable time. The good news is our building is on the first floor, no elevators. You walk in, you walk out. And the second floor, where we have a venture capital firm as a tenant, they just walk up their steps. They love it. They're like, you know, we don't want to be in a building with an elevator. So buildings without elevators are better. I don't know what Fenwick and West is going to do because they're in like a 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 floor building, right, Blake? Isn't it like a multi-floor building? And it's got an elevator from the basement that runs to the car lot. So whenever they restart, they're going to have to time the elevators correctly, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you just recently retired there, right? Wasn't there some date where you retired this year, or was it last year?
Last year.
Last year. So you timed it. You probably timed it well to get out of that building, because I got to believe if you aggregate a lot of people together, particularly with the HVAC system, there's greater and greater risks as you put more people into one building. We have a case that's going to go to trial soon on that issue, where the tenant is a big tenant. We represent them, and they don't want to return to the building because the elevators apparently are so slow that their people can't stage themselves up and down the elevator. That's another case for another story. So Audrey, why don't you wrap up just saying how you're keeping a diary of every week, what you learn, and how you're going to let your mom and grandfather peer into it from time to time so they could see what's happening to their offspring.
Jack, before Audrey wraps up, I just want to let you know that Pablo, remember my son, we had lunch with him. He is highly jealous of his sister.
Well, he's got to put
working for you.
He's got to put in.
He was really jealous.
He's got to put in. He's got to put in his resume and his application for 2024 or so. He's like 14, right?
Yeah, he'll be 15 in October.
Right.
Yeah.
So in 3 or so years, we actually have this year. Second time we've done it in the last, that I've been at the firm, more than 35 years after leaving Fenwick and West. We've had another high school graduate, like a kid out of high school. And I thought it was the first time we did it, because usually we expect people to be out of college. And someone reminded me that we actually had a 16-year-old from Russia, a guy who stayed with us for like 10 years, in the sense that he did high school, he finished high school, he would come back every summer. Then he then he went to college. He'd come back every summer in college. And then he stayed for 3 years between college and going to law school. And then he went to law school and he couldn't get a job after the first year of law school. So he worked for us. He did get a job second year. And now he's at some big, ginormous firm. I want to say Paul Hastings or one of the big firms. The Paul Hastings people hire all of our people all the time. We just got a call from a guy in Hong Kong that said, oh yeah, you know, Alex Chan was on the phone from Hong Kong yesterday on the Zoom. And he said, yeah, you know, Paul, I just mentioned to Paul Hastings that I work for you. And they were like, yeah, we know Jack, we know Computer Law Group. We're hiring you. So he's going to work in September. So I think we've got about 4 or 5 alumni, both at Paul Hastings and I think at Fenwick and West, because Joe Belichick was at Fenwick and West, a bunch of other people. Song Mi is at, I don't know what she's doing right now, but at some point we'll get somebody to like interview all of these alumni. And maybe Fenwick and West should do the same thing, Blake, to create like an alumni roster of all these people and where they landed, because it must be in the thousands at this point. If it's in the hundreds for me, it must be in the thousands for you guys, right? Because you'd have a hiring class of like 20 or 30 people, right? All the time?
No, that's right.
Yeah, so let's wrap up with Audrey. Can you tell us what you're doing just generally in terms of keeping a diary so your folks here can, your grandfather and your mother can know what they're going to maybe see a bit of?
Yeah, well, I've actually been learning a lot of things, obviously in terms of law, but just way beyond that. Like, I'm really learning a lot of good skills from Jack in terms of entrepreneur and law and just organization in general. And I don't know. I wasn't really prepared to like talk about things that we've been doing here, and I don't have my diary, but my notes are like really crazy. They look like a mad scientist notebook, but I definitely have a few things more orderly that I put together. One thing that I really like is Jack has us do like a weekly bullet point, like 5 bullet points of what we learned and what we would like to learn next week. And yeah, it's really cool. And everything that, I don't know, I like how it's structured for us to learn. And yeah, I just feel like everyone can grow in their different aspects that they're called to. And
so let's plan to do another one at the end of the summer so we could do a wrap up of what you learned. I've got to get on to a court hearing or I continue this, but let's stop for now and plan a part 2, maybe by the end of August or the beginning of September or whenever it is that the summer actually ends. Who knows? It might not end. Maybe you'll stay with us. We hope you stay with us. We love your daughter. We love your granddaughter. We just want you to know that. And tell Pablo he's got to get on the list because we want him next. And we want Dylan too, more immediately. So we want to have like the whole Stafford tribe to be part of this.
Dylan will be a good president too.
Okay, good. Still like hearing that. All right, see you. Have a good day. Thanks for spending time. Thanks, Blake. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.